What if you spent years rebuilding yourself, getting fit, getting strong, finally finding the courage to leave an abusive relationship, moving across the street from your parents for safety, creating a new life for yourself and your son? And then the early morning hours of October 3rd, 2020, you vanished into thin air. Your car gone, your body gone, no phone calls, no texts, no bank transactions, nothing. As if you simply ceased to exist. For 4 years, your family searched. Investigators searched. Your ex-boyfriend, the man who once threatened to hide your body where no one would ever find it, sat in a prison cell, convicted of your murder. But still, nothing until a quiet Saturday morning in November 2024, when someone stumbled upon the answer to a question that had haunted Central Wisconsin for over 1,500 days. This is the story of Cassandra Ayon, 27-year-old mother, daughter, and friend who disappeared from a trailer park in the middle of the night. A woman who told everyone exactly who would hurt her if something happened. A woman whose worst fear came true. But this story doesn't end with her disappearance. It ends with justice, discovery, and the heartbreaking reality of domestic violence in America. To understand what happened to Cassandra Ayon, you first need to understand who she was. Cassandra was a 27-year-old Hispanic woman living in Loyal, Wisconsin, a small rural community in Clark County with a population of just over 1,200 people. At 5 feet 4 inches and 185 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes, Cassandra had a distinctive appearance, made even more memorable by her tattoos. On her right shoulder, she wore a beautiful piece of roses. On her left forearm, a rose with a dove, a rosary, and the name Alberto. But Cassandra was so much more than a physical description on a missing persons poster. Her best friend, Amanda Ruth, remembered Cassandra as someone who had known her since grade school. They were neighbors who grew up together, went to high school together, and remained close through all of life's milestones. In 2013, they were even roommates right when Cassandra found out she was pregnant with her son. When she had moved back home that year, she lost a lot of weight, Amanda recalled. Super fit, like was running, walking, working out every day, and she looked amazing. That transformation wasn't just physical. It was symbolic of something deeper. Cassandra was rebuilding herself by 2020. Cassandra was a single mother working at Marathon Cheese in Marathon City, about a 45-minute drive from her home in Loyal. It was hard work, often requiring late shifts, but Cassandra was dedicated. She had her son to think about. She had plans. She had dreams. She had recently made a significant decision, one that would ultimately seal her fate. After years of an on-and-off relationship marked by abuse and control, Cassandra finally moved out from her boyfriend, Jesus Contreras Perez. Some friends said she had been trying to leave him as far back as the summer of 2019. By September 2020, she had finally done it, moving into a home across the street from her parents in Loyal. The proximity to her family wasn't accidental. It was strategic. It was survival. Cassandra shared a 7-year-old son with Contreras Perez, a man who was 40 years old at the time, 13 years her senior. According to court documents and witness testimony, their relationship was anything but healthy. Friends described it as complicated, tumultuous, and dangerous. But in those final weeks before her disappearance, Cassandra seemed to be finding herself again. She was focused on fitness and health. She was making plans with friends. She was building a life separate from the man who had controlled her for so long. On October 2nd, 2020, Cassandra had lunch with her mother at home, the last time her mother would see her daughter alive. It was a normal day, an unremarkable meal, the kind of moment families take for granted until it becomes the last. That evening, Cassandra had a late shift at Marathon Cheese. After work, she made plans with friends. They were supposed to go shopping in Eau Claire the next day. Normal plans. Regular life. But for Cassandra, there was nothing normal about her life anymore. Because lurking in the background of every plan, every outing, every moment of freedom, was the shadow of Jesus Contreras Perez, a man who, according to witnesses, had been following her, threatening her, and stalking her for months, a man who had allegedly told her, according to testimony, that if she ever cheated on him, he knew where to hide her body so that no one would ever find it. Let that statement sink in for a moment. This wasn't a vague threat. This was a promise, a blueprint, a confession before the crime. October 2nd, 2020. Started like many other days for Cassandra Ayon. It was a Friday, the beginning of what should have been a relaxing weekend. The weather in central Wisconsin was transitioning into autumn, with cooler temperatures and the changing leaves painting the landscape in shades of orange and gold. That afternoon, around 5:45 p.m., surveillance cameras at Marathon Cheese in Marathon City captured something significant. In the parking lot where Cassandra worked, a figure appeared, someone who looked like Jesus Contreras Perez, hanging around, watching, waiting. According to the criminal complaint, video showed him there, in the area, at the exact time Cassandra would be finishing her shift. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a pattern. Cassandra left work that evening, and despite whatever interaction may have occurred with Contreras Perez, she continued with her plans. Around 11 p.m., she drove to Unity, Wisconsin, a tiny community about 15 miles north of Marshfield, with a population of only about 330 people. There, she picked up a friend, we'll call Friend A, protecting their privacy while acknowledging their crucial role in this story. At 11:22 p.m., Cassandra and Friend A stopped at a gas station, a mundane moment captured by timestamps and security footage. Life was continuing normally. The night was young. The plans were still on track. By 12:11 a.m., now technically October 3rd, Cassandra and Friend A arrived at another friend's home in Marshfield. Let's call this person Friend B. The three of them spent the early morning hours together, hanging out, talking, making plans. They decided they would all go shopping in Eau Claire later that day, October 3rd. It was something to look forward to. A typical Saturday activity. Around 2 a.m., Cassandra and Friend A decided to head back. The party was winding down, and both had things to do the next day. They made the drive back to Unity, arriving somewhere between 2:45 and 3 o'clock a.m. At this point, Cassandra was still alive, still making decisions, still in control of her destiny. But somewhere in the next hour, everything changed, according to Friend A's statement to police. Cassandra stayed at the Unity location, specifically at the Unity Trailer Court on West Fisher Street until approximately 3:45 to 4 o'clock a.m. Friend A watched as Cassandra got into her black 2015 Chevrolet Impala with Wisconsin license plate AHC 2509. Friend A watched her drive away into the darkness. That was the last confirmed sighting of Cassandra Ayon alive. Now, let's pause here and reconstruct what investigators believe happened next. Based on evidence that would later come to light, cell phone data would later reveal something chilling. Jesus Contreras Perez's phone was in the same area as Cassandra's phone at the time of her disappearance. Their phones and, presumably, they themselves were in close proximity during those early morning hours of October 3rd. Contreras Perez would later report his work-issued phone missing. The timing of this report raised immediate suspicions. Why would someone report a phone missing right after being in the area where their ex-girlfriend vanished? Investigators noted this was highly unusual. Normally, an employee would go through the company to report such issues. But Contreras Perez reported it himself, directly, quickly. Was he destroying evidence? Was he creating an alibi? These questions would haunt the investigation. But in those early morning hours of October 3rd, as Cassandra drove away from the Unity Trailer Court, none of this was known yet. Her family was asleep. Her friends assumed she'd made it home safely. Her son was staying with his father, Jesus Contreras Paris, for the first time since Cassandra had moved out. Just 3 weeks earlier, the weekend stretched ahead. Shopping plans awaited. Life was supposed to continue, but Cassandra never made it home that night. She never called her friends on October 3rd to finalize the shopping plans. She never showed up for work at Marathon Cheese on Monday. October 5th, her phone went silent. Her social media accounts where she had been active went dark. Her last post was on October 2nd. After that, nothing. And somewhere in the rural Wisconsin landscape, a black 2015 Chevrolet Impala with license plate AHZ2509 vanished, as if it had driven off the edge of the earth. Sunday, October 4th, 2020, 12:39 p.m. That's when everything officially changed. The Clark County Sheriff's Office received a 911 call, a call that would launch one of the most intensive investigations in the county's history. On the other end of the line were Cassandra's parents. Frantic with worry, upon arrival, deputies made contact with the complainant's Cassandra's mother and stepfather. Their story was simple but terrifying. They hadn't seen their daughter since Friday. Cassandra had recently moved into a home across the street from them. The proximity should have brought them comfort, should have meant they'd see her regularly, but they hadn't seen her. And when they tried calling her phone, it went straight to voicemail. During the initial investigation, deputies worked to establish a timeline. They spoke with friends and family members, piecing together Cassandra's last known movements. It was through these interviews that they determined she was last seen Saturday morning, around 3:45 a.m. in the Unity area, when she left a friend's house that same day as the investigation began to unfold. Another concerning detail emerged. The friend who Cassandra was supposed to go shopping with in Eau Claire showed up at her mother's house, looking for her. They were confused. Why hadn't Cassandra called? Why hadn't she shown up? It wasn't like her to bail on plans without saying something. The pieces started falling into place, and none of them formed a reassuring picture. By Monday, October 5th, the situation escalated. Cassandra didn't show up for her shift at Marathon Cheese. For someone who needed the job, who had a son to support, who was trying to build a new life, missing work without calling was alarming. The Clark County Sheriff's Office quickly recognized this wasn't a case of someone taking an impromptu trip or needing space. The investigation kicked into high gear. On October 7th, just 3 days after the missing person report was filed, the Wisconsin Division of Criminal Investigation and the Wisconsin State Crime Lab joined the investigation. This was significant. These weren't resources typically deployed for a standard missing person case. Their involvement signaled that law enforcement suspected something more sinister. The community of Loyal and the surrounding areas were alerted. Cassandra's description went out. Hispanic female, 5'4", 185 pounds, black hair, brown eyes, distinctive tattoos. Last seen wearing a black long-sleeve shirt, blue jeans, and brown boots. Driving a black 2015 Chevrolet Impala with Wisconsin license plate AHC-2509. Her family created a Facebook page, Missing Cassandra Ayon, to spread awareness. They posted her photos, pleaded for information, asked people to share. The posts were heartbreaking in their simplicity. Cassandra is still missing. Please continue to share. She is someone's mother, sister, daughter, friend. As October wore on, the searches intensified. The Clark County Sheriff's Office put out a specific request. They asked hunters to be on the lookout for Cassandra or her vehicle. With deer hunting season approaching, thousands of people would be in the woods across central Wisconsin. If Cassandra or her car was out there, hidden in the rural landscape, perhaps a hunter would spot something investigators had missed. With many heading to the woods this weekend and in the near future, please be mindful of your surroundings. The Sheriff's Office posted on Facebook on October 9th, but days turned into weeks, and there was nothing. No sightings. No vehicle. No body. No trace. Investigators weren't sitting idle, though. Behind the scenes, they were building a case, following leads, and focusing their attention on one particular individual, Jesus. Contreras-Perez. The interviews with Cassandra's friends painted a disturbing picture. Multiple witnesses came forward with stories of abuse, threats, and controlling behavior. One friend described an incident from July 2020 when she and Cassandra went for a walk together. They encountered a vehicle parked on the side of the road, unusual in itself. Jesus Contreras-Perez got out of the car and confronted them, asking why they were there, raising his hand to Cassandra as if he was going to hit her. Though he didn't strike her, Cassandra flinched, the instinctive response of someone who had been hit before. Another friend reported that about 2 weeks before Cassandra's disappearance, she had sent photos showing bruises around her eye and on her arms. When asked what happened, Cassandra said Contreras-Perez had caused the injuries. A co-worker remembered Cassandra saying something chilling. If anything happened to her, Contreras-Perez would be the one responsible. But perhaps the most damning statement came from another witness. Cassandra had confided that Contreras-Perez told her if she ever cheated on him, he knew where to hide her body so that no one would ever find it. This statement would become central to the reinvestigation in December 2020, nearly 3 months after Cassandra's disappearance. The Clark County Sheriff's Office released an update. They were now specifically looking for a red or maroon SUV that may have been seen driving around or parked on residential side streets near the Unity Trailer Court during the time Cassandra went missing. This detail was significant. Surveillance footage from October 2nd had shown someone resembling Contreras-Perez hanging around Cassandra's workplace. Witnesses knew he drove different vehicles. The net was closing. Meanwhile, investigators were building their case through digital forensics, crucial element of modern investigations that would ultimately prove. Decisive bank records showed no activity on Cassandra's accounts after October 2nd. Her social media accounts, which had been active, went silent after her last post on October 2nd. There were no records of her leaving the United States, and she didn't have a passport. Anyway, but most importantly, cell phone data told a story. Contreras-Perez's phone and Cassandra's phone were in the same location at the time of her disappearance. Then, conveniently, Contreras-Perez reported his work phone missing shortly after. When investigators tried to interview Contreras-Perez in the days following Cassandra's disappearance, they discovered he had left Wisconsin entirely. He had traveled to Minnesota and Iowa, detail that raised immediate red flags. When someone you're in a relationship with goes missing, the typical response is to stay local, to help search, to provide information, not to flee to another state. When Contreras-Perez finally returned to the area and spoke with investigators, he was already a suspect. But it would take months of meticulous police work to build a case strong enough to bring charges. As winter gave way to spring in 2021, the investigation into Cassandra Ayon's disappearance continued with painstaking detail. The Clark County Sheriff's Office, working in partnership with the Wisconsin Department of Justice's Division of Criminal Investigation, was building a case piece by piece, and at the center of that case was Jesus Contreras-Perez, the 41-year-old father of Cassandra's son. Let's examine what investigators uncovered. One of the most damning pieces of evidence came from Contreras-Perez's internet search history. According to the criminal complaint, between September 26th and 27th, 2020, just 1 week before Cassandra vanished, Contreras-Perez conducted a series of disturbing Google searches: how to make a homemade silencer, what a silencer really sounds like, presumably building a silencer, how to test a silencer. Let that sink in. A week before your ex-girlfriend disappears without a trace, you're researching how to build a firearm silencer, but it gets worse. On September 18, 2020, Cassandra and a male friend had gone to a quick-trip convenience store. They left their phones in the car while they went inside. It was a brief, innocent stop, but investigators discovered that Contreras Perez had been following them. He took down the male friend's license plate number. Then, his search history revealed more queries. How to get address from license plate. Searches through the Wisconsin DMV website using the friend's name. He was tracking her, monitoring her movements, finding out who she was with. This wasn't jealousy. This was surveillance. This was control, as investigators interviewed Cassandra's friends and family. A pattern of escalating violence and threats emerged. One of Cassandra's male friends reported a particularly frightening encounter. He and Cassandra had gone to a bar together. When he dropped her off at her home afterward, Contreras Perez was waiting, according to the witness's statement to police. Contreras Perez showed up with a knife and said, "You and your FG boyfriends. They are probably all running a train on you. If I ever see them around you, they are going to get hurt, and so are you." A knife. Direct threats of violence. Not just to Cassandra, but to anyone who dared to be around her. Another witness described how Contreras Perez would freak out whenever he learned Cassandra was hanging out with people of the opposite sex. He had been following her from work to friends' houses, creating an atmosphere of constant surveillance. Cassandra's friends reported seeing bruises on her wrists and arms. She had sent photos documenting the abuse, vidance she likely hoped would protect her someday. Multiple witnesses reported the same. Chilling statement. Cassandra told them that if anything ever happened to her, it would be Contreras Perez who did it. She knew. She knew exactly who posed a threat to her life. She told everyone who would listen. But knowledge didn't save her. To understand the dynamics at play, investigators delved into the history of Cassandra and Contreras Perez's relationship. They had been together, on and off, since around 2011 or 2012, nearly a decade of tumultuous connection. Their son was born in 2013, when Cassandra was about 20 years old and Contreras Perez was in his mid-30s. According to Cassandra's mother and stepfather, the relationship was marked by periods of breaking up and getting back together. Some friends said Cassandra had been trying to leave him as far back as the summer of 2019, over a year before her disappearance. But leaving an abusive relationship isn't a single decision. It's a process, often requiring multiple attempts. Research shows that it takes an average of 7 attempts before someone successfully leaves an abusive partner permanently. For Cassandra, breaking free was complicated by the fact that they shared a child together, requiring ongoing contact. In September 2020, 3 weeks before her disappearance, Cassandra finally made the move. She relocated to a home across the street from her parents in Loyola. Strategic decision for safety and support. But proximity to her family couldn't protect her from someone determined to harm her. The weekend of October 2nd to 4th, 2020, was particularly significant. It was the first time since Cassandra moved out that their 7-year-old son stayed with Contreras Perez. Cassandra had given him that opportunity, perhaps hoping to maintain some normalcy for their child. Or perhaps because she was legally required to allow visitation. During that same weekend, Cassandra vanished. On May 5, 2021, 7 months after Cassandra's disappearance, preliminary hearing was held in Clark County Circuit Court. A judge found probable cause to move forward with charges against Jesus Contreras-Perez. In early May 2021, Contreras Perez was officially charged with stalking resulting in bodily harm, a felony charge that included domestic abuse modifiers. This charge was based on the pattern of behavior documented by witnesses. The following: the threats, the physical violence, the controlling behavior. But investigators weren't done. They believed something far more serious had occurred. On June 7, 2021, months after Cassandra's disappearance, the charges escalated dramatically. The Wisconsin Department of Justice, through its Division of Criminal Investigation, filed additional charges against Contreras-Perez. First-degree intentional homicide, domestic abuse. As party to a crime, hiding a corpse, as party to a crime. Stalking, causing bodily harm. That party to a crime modifier was significant. It suggested that investigators believed Contreras-Perez might not have acted alone. He may have had accomplices, people who helped him kill Cassandra, dispose of her body, or hide her vehicle. This theory was supported by the fact that Contreras-Perez, despite his apparent surveillance of Cassandra, couldn't have been in all the places necessary to execute such a complete disappearance by himself. But who were these potential accomplices? That question would remain unanswered for years. October 3, 2021, marked 1 year since Cassandra was last seen. The Wisconsin Department of Justice released a statement, keeping the case in the public eye. If anyone has any information on the location of Cassandra, please call the Clark County Sheriff's Office at 715-743-3157. The statement was simple, but carried immense weight. A year had passed. No body, no car. No answers. For Cassandra's family, October 3, 2021 was a day of grief without closure. They couldn't have a funeral. They couldn't visit a grave. They could only hope, search, and wonder. Meanwhile, Jesus Contreras-Perez sat in the Clark County Jail on a $25,000 cash bond stemming from the initial stalking charge. As the homicide charge was added, he remained behind bars, waiting for his day in court. Clark County Sheriff Scott N. would later describe the investigation as a complex analytical case that utilized interview techniques and technical digital expertise. Indeed, this was a case built on digital forensics search history, cell phone data, witness testimony documenting abuse and threats, surveillance footage placing Contreras-Perez at Cassandra's workplace, financial records showing no activity after. October 2 timeline reconstruction establishing last known whereabouts. But the most frustrating element remained: no body, no crime scene, no vehicle. Prosecutors would have to prove a murder occurred without the fundamental evidence of a murder, the victim's remains. This wasn't unprecedented, but it was challenging. Cases without a body, known as no-body homicides, require prosecutors to build overwhelming circumstantial evidence. Every detail matters. Every witness is crucial. Every piece of digital evidence could make or break the case. Throughout 2021 and into 2022, the investigation continued. The case was being prosecuted by Clark County District Attorney Melissa Imlow, with assistance from Wisconsin DOJ Criminal Litigation Unit Assistant Attorney General Annie J. Both were experienced prosecutors, but this case would test their skills. How do you convince a jury that someone is guilty of murder when you can't prove the person is even dead? When there's no crime scene, no murder weapon, no witnesses to the actual crime? The answer lay in the pattern, the history, the digital trail, the threats, the timing, and ultimately, in the words Cassandra herself had spoken, "If anything happens to me, it'll be him." June 2022, Niles, Wisconsin. Clark County Circuit Court. Nearly 2 years after Cassandra Ayon drove away from Unity Trailer Court into the darkness, her case finally went to trial. Jesus Contreras-Perez, now 42 years old, sat in the courtroom facing 3 felony charges: first-degree intentional homicide, domestic abuse as party to a crime, hiding a corpse as party to a crime, stalking, causing bodily harm. The trial was presided over by Jackson County Judge Daniel Dean, acting as a substitute judge in the Clark County case. For 5 days, the courtroom would become the stage for a dramatic presentation of evidence, testimony, and legal arguments. Over 100 witnesses would be called to testify. an enormous number that spoke to the complexity and thoroughness of the prosecution's case. Clark County District Attorney Melissa Inlow, along with Assistant Attorney General Annie J. from the Wisconsin DOJ, laid out their case piece by piece. Their strategy was clear: paint a picture of escalating violence, obsessive control, and premeditated murder. They presented the surveillance footage from October 2nd, showing someone who looked like Contreras Perez lurking at Marathon Cheese's parking lot at 5:45 p.m. exactly. When Cassandra would be finishing work, they presented cell phone data showing that Contreras Perez's phone was in the same location as Cassandra's phone during the early morning hours of October 3, 2020, the exact time and place where she disappeared. They walked the jury through Contreras Perez's internet search history, searches for how to make a firearm silencers, searches for how to get someone's address from their license plate searches. Through the Wisconsin DMV database, they called witness after witness, friends, coworkers, family members who testified about the abuse Cassandra suffered. One friend testified about the incident in Walls 2020, when Contreras Perez confronted them during a walk, raising his hand to Cassandra in a threatening manner. Another friend testified about seeing the bruises on Cassandra's arms and wrists, and hearing her explanation that Contreras Perez had caused them to coworkers testified about Cassandra's fear, about how she said Contreras Perez had been following her, about how she knew he was dangerous, and then came the most chilling testimony. Multiple witnesses recounted Cassandra's statement that if she ever cheated on him, Contreras Perez knew where to hide her body so no one would ever find it. The prosecution argued this statement was essentially a confession, a preview of his plan. They also pointed out Cassandra's final words to friends: "If anything happens to me, it will be him." The prosecution painted a picture of a woman who knew exactly who posed a threat to her life, who documented the abuse, who told everyone who would listen in, still couldn't escape. They presented evidence that Contreras Perez reported his work phone missing shortly after Cassandra's disappearance, suspicious timing that suggested he was destroying evidence. They highlighted how, when investigators first tried to interview him, he had fled to Minnesota and Iowa rather than staying to help search for the mother of his child. And they argued that the complete disappearance of both Cassandra and her vehicles suggested planning and possibly assistance, since the party to a crime modifiers, Contreras Perez, was represented by attorney Claire Longden. Her task was nearly impossible: defend a man accused of murder when the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. The defense's strategy centered on reasonable doubt. Without a body, without a crime scene, without a murder weapon, how could the prosecution prove murder? They argued that Cassandra could have left voluntarily. Perhaps she wanted to escape her life, start fresh, somewhere new. But this argument was weak. Prosecutors countered with evidence of Cassandra's deep connections to her family, and especially to her son. Her social media accounts had gone silent. Her bank accounts were untouched. Her phone was off. And most tellingly, she never showed up for work, behavior completely inconsistent with someone planning a new life. The defense also tried to challenge the admissibility of certain witness statements. Before the trial, Claire Longden had filed a pre-trial motion asking that statements attributed to Cassandra by her friends and coworkers be excluded, arguing they would violate her client's constitutional right to confront his accuser. Judge Geen had ruled on this motion before trial, determining that certain statements met exceptions for Hirsutha recent perception rule and the state of mind exception. These legal provisions allow for specific types of out-of-court statements to be admitted as evidence, but as we'll discuss later, this ruling would become central to a post-conviction appeal. In her closing arguments, Assistant Attorney General Annie J. made an emotional appeal to the jury. She talked about the fear Cassandra must have felt in her final moments. She had to know what was going to happen when she saw him that night, Jay said. She emphasized the cruelty of Contreras' refusal to reveal where Cassandra's remains were hidden. Cassandra's family has no grave to visit, she told the jury. There is no grave. There is no marker. They don't know where she is. They have no location to go to mourn. She also highlighted the likelihood of accomplices. They don't know what happened. They don't know who else is involved, and that must be terrifying. They don't know who else is out there keeping an eye on them. The prosecution had carried a heavy burden, proving murder without the fundamental evidence of a body. But they had built their case on a foundation of pattern, threat, opportunity, and digital evidence. Now it was in the hands of the jury. After 5 days of testimony, the jury deliberated. The wait must have been agonizing for Cassandra's family. 2 years of grief. 2 years of not knowing. 2 years of hoping for justice. But the jury didn't deliberate for long. On June 10, 2022, they returned with their verdict. Guilty on all 3 counts. First-degree intentional homicide. Hiding a corpse. Stalking causing bodily harm. The verdict was decisive. The jury had been convinced, even without a body, even without a crime scene. The evidence was overwhelming in the courtroom. There were likely tears from relief, from continued grief, from the weight of justice finally being served. But for Cassandra's family, the victory was bittersweet. They had justice, yes, but they still didn't have Cassandra. They still didn't know where she was. They still couldn't lay her to rest. On September 12, 2022, nearly 2 years after Cassandra's disappearance, Jesus Contreras Perez stood before Judge Daniel Dean for sentencing. This was his opportunity to speak, to show remorse, perhaps even to reveal where Cassandra's remains were hidden. Instead, Contreras Perez used his time to proclaim his innocence and attack the investigation, calling police investigators and prosecutors crooked rats who violated his rights. Contreras Perez maintained he did not kill Cassandra Ayon. He vowed to his young son that he would one day prove his innocence and be free. He apologized to Cassandra's family, but not for killing her. Instead, he apologized for not being able to help with the investigation since he was a suspect. I want to say that I'm sorry for Cassandra's family, he said. I'm sorry for all the things they've been going through. I apologize for not being able to help since day one. I wish I could have done something more to help, but that's impossible. The statement was remarkable in its deflection. Even after a jury had found him guilty, even facing a life sentence, he maintained his innocence and positioned himself as a victim of a flawed investigation. He offered no information about where Cassandra's remains might be. No closure for her family. No confession. Nothing. His attorney, Claire Longden, informed the court that Contreras Perez planned to appeal the conviction. She made no arguments about the seriousness of the charges, noting that she couldn't speak to the manner of Cassandra's death since that remained unknown. Any hope that sentencing might bring answers was quickly dashed. Assistant Attorney General Annie J. addressed the court, emphasizing the ongoing cruelty inflicted on Cassandra's family. Cassandra's family has no grave to visit, she said again. There is no grave. There is no marker. They don't know where she is. They have no location to go to mourn. She also reiterated the possibility of accomplices. They don't know what happened. They don't know who else is involved, and that must be terrifying. They don't know who else is out there keeping an eye on them. This statement was significant. The party to a crime charges suggested prosecutors believed Contreras Perez had help. Perhaps from family members. Perhaps from friends. The investigation into possible accomplices would continue. Judge Dean noted that Contreras-Perez had shown no remorse during the trial or at sentencing for the crime of first-degree intentional homicide. There was really only one possible sentence under Wisconsin law: life in prison. The question was whether Contreras-Perez would ever be eligible for release. Judge Dean's decision was clear. Jesus Contreras-Perez was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would never be eligible for release. He would die behind bars for the crimes of hiding a corpse and stalking causing bodily harm. Additional sentences were imposed to run concurrently with the life sentence. Clark County District Attorney Melissa Enlow released a statement. The jury verdict and court sentencing is the right outcome. Mr. Contreras-Perez stole Cassandra Ayon from her family and from their young son. Although a life sentence is justice for Cassandra and her family, we will continue to search for Cassandra and Mr. Contreras-Perez's accomplices. That final line was key. We will continue to search. Justice had been served in court. But the search for Cassandra and for the truth about what happened to her would continue. Attorney General Josh Call also released a statement. Thank you to the Clark County Sheriff's Office, the Clark County District Attorney's Office, and those at DOJ whose work resulted in the conviction of the defendant for his heinous crimes. This sentence ensures that the defendant will not further endanger the public. Clark County Sheriff Scott N. added, this investigation was a complex analytical case that utilized interview techniques and technical digital expertise to bring this case to a close. Thank you to all the highly trained professionals that put this complex case together and presented it in a manner that the overwhelming evidence led to a conviction. True to his attorney's word, Contreras-Perez filed an appeal. His legal team argued that the trial had been fundamentally unfair. The months passed. October 2022 marked 2 years since Cassandra's disappearance. Then 2023. Then 2024. Still no body. Still no vehicle. Still no complete answers. In December 2023, Cassandra's case was featured in News Channel 7's Forgotten podcast, Deep Dive into Cold Cases and Missing Persons. The podcast was released in both English and Spanish, reaching broader audiences and keeping Cassandra's story alive in the public consciousness. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the appeal was working its way through the legal system. On March 14, 2025, more than 4 years after the verdict, Judge Daniel Dean, the same judge who had presided over the original trial, issued a shocking ruling in response to a motion for post-conviction relief. Judge Dean determined that certain hearsay statements should not have been admitted at trial. Specifically, statements from Cassandra's friends and coworkers about threats Contreras-Perez had made. Remember that pre-trial motion defense attorney Claire Longden had filed, the one asking that statements attributed to Cassandra be excluded because they violated her client's constitutional right to confront his accuser. Well, in his 16-page decision, Judge Dean now agreed that some of those statements had been improperly admitted. Contreras-Perez's, a post-conviction attorney, Kathleen Gratelioshan, had identified 56 statements made at the trial that were allegedly inadmissible hearsay. Judge Dean analyzed these carefully, applying Wisconsin's statutory exceptions for hearsay. He determined that 3 groups of statements were improperly admitted in a way that prevented Contreras-Perez from getting a fair trial. Statements from Cassandra's friends and coworkers indicating that if anything ever happened to her, Contreras-Perez would be 2 blame statements about Contreras-Perez's threat to hide her body, where no one would find it. Other statements that went beyond establishing Cassandra's state of mind and instead implicated Contreras-Perez directly. Judge Dean wrote, the erroneous admission of threats to kill Ayon and hide her body was plain error. Contreras-Perez is entitled to a new trial on all 3 counts. Let that sink in for a moment. A jury had convicted him. He'd been sentenced to life in prison. He'd sat in a cell for nearly 3 years since sentencing. And now? A new trial was ordered. The ruling didn't mean Cassandra Perez was innocent. It didn't mean the verdict was wrong. It meant that certain evidence shouldn't have been admitted, and the jury might have reached a different verdict without it. For prosecutors, this was a setback, but not a disaster. They would have to try the case again, this time without relying on some of Cassandra's statements to her friends. But they still had the cell phone data, the internet search history, the surveillance footage, other witness testimony, the pattern of behavior, the suspicious disappearance. After Cassandra vanished for Cassandra's family, this ruling was devastating. Justice achieved, then questioned. Closure granted, then snatched away. As of October 2024, Cassandra Perez remained in custody. A new trial would eventually be scheduled. The whole process would begin again. But then, something happened that no one expected. Saturday, November 30th, 2024. It was a cold late autumn day in central Wisconsin. Deer hunting season was in full swing, the state's 9-day. Gun deer season brought thousands of hunters into the woods. But it wasn't a hunter who made the discovery that would finally answer the question that had haunted Clark and Marathon counties. For over 4 years, a citizen identity protected by authorities was on private property near County Highway P and Abe Lincoln Road in the town of Brighton, Marathon County. This was rural land, the kind of landscape that defines central Wisconsin. Wooded areas, agricultural fields, quiet spaces where you could hide something for years and no one would find it. Until they do. The citizen discovered what appeared to be human remains. They immediately contacted authorities. Within hours, the area was swarmed with law enforcement. The Wisconsin Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigation, the Clark County Sheriff's Office, the Marathon County Sheriff's Office, the Marathon County Medical Examiner's Office, the DNR, the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory, the Wisconsin State Patrol. This was it. After 1,519 days. After countless searches. After a trial, conviction, and pending retrial. After all the hoping and wondering and searching, they had found something. The location was significant. Brighton, in Marathon County, was about 8 miles from Unity in Clark County where Cassandra was last seen. Not far, but far enough that previous searches hadn't uncovered it. The property owners, according to Captain Jeff Stefanek of the Marathon County Sheriff's Office, had no known connection to Cassandra Ayon or Jesus Cassandra Perez. This wasn't their land. They didn't know about it. It was just there, hidden. Human remains don't come with identification. The process of confirming identity requires careful forensic analysis, especially when remains have been exposed to the elements for over 4 years. The remains were taken to the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory for analysis. Medical examiners began their work. DNA testing, dental records, any identifying characteristics. The wait must have been agonizing for Cassandra's family. Could it really be her? After all this time, or was this another false hope? On Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024, the Wisconsin Department of Justice made an official announcement. The remains found on November 30th had been positively identified as Cassandra Ayon. She had been found after 1,521 days. After 4 years, 2 months, she had been there, just 8 miles from where she was last seen, the whole time. Through the trial, through the conviction, through the appeals, through every search, through every desperate hope of her family, she was there. The Wisconsin Department of Justice, in partnership with the Clark and Marathon County Sheriff's Offices and the Clark County District Attorney's Office, released a statement. The remains of Cassandra Ayon, last seen in Unity, Wis. On October 3, 2020, have been found on private property near County Highway P and Abe Lincoln Road in the town of Brighton. Clark County Sheriff Scott N. said, "This case has been on our minds for years. Our hearts and thoughts go out to the family and friends of Cassandra Ayon." Clark County District Attorney Melissa Enlow, who had prosecuted Contreras Perez, stated, "Although we were pleased with the outcome of the trial and felt that justice had been done on behalf of Cassandra Ayon, we never stopped looking for her. We hope that the discovery of her remains lends a sense of closure and finality to her family and everyone who misses and mourns her." Attorney General Josh Call added, "My heart goes out to Cassandra's family and friends. Thank you to everyone who has worked to get justice and help provide answers in this appalling case." Notably absent from the discovery, Cassandra's black 2015 Chevrolet Impala with license plate AHZ-2509. As of January 2025, the vehicle still has not been located. Authorities continue to search for it, believing it may contain additional evidence or provide clues about potential accomplices. The search continues not just for the car, but for anyone who may have helped Contreras Perez. As the Clark County Sheriff's Office told investigators in January 2025, they are still looking for potential accomplices, hence the party to a crime charges. For Cassandra's family, the discovery brought a complicated mix of emotions: relief, grief, closure, anger, sadness. Finally, they could lay her to rest. Finally, they could have a grave to visit. Finally, they had proof not that they needed. If that Cassandra hadn't run away, hadn't started a new life somewhere, hadn't abandoned her son, she had been taken from them, just as they always knew. Her body had been hidden, just as Contreras Perez had allegedly threatened. And now, after 1,521 days, she could come home. But the discovery also raised new questions. How did she die? What were the circumstances? Who helped hide her body? Why was it hidden there? The investigation continues. The search for accomplices continues. The search for her vehicle continues. Justice has been served in court. Contreras Perez was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, though his conviction is now under appeal and a new trial has been ordered. But the complete story of what happened to Cassandra Ayon on October 3, 2020, may never be fully known. What we do know is this: a young mother who was trying to escape an abusive relationship, who moved across the street from her parents for safety, who told everyone who would listen that her ex-boyfriend posed a danger to her life. She was right. She knew exactly who would hurt her. She just couldn't stop it from happening. Now that we've covered the facts of the case, let's examine the theories about what actually happened to Cassandra Ayon and address the questions that remain. This is Ayon. This is the theory prosecutors presented at trial, and it's supported by substantial evidence. According to this theory, Jesus Contreras Perez planned Cassandra's murder in advance. The evidence supporting this includes the internet searches a week before her disappearance. Contreras Perez was searching for how to make a firearm silencer. This suggests planning and preparation. The surveillance: he had been following her, tracking her movements, taking license plates of people she associated with. He knew her patterns, her routines. The threat: he had allegedly told Cassandra he knew where to hide her body so no one would ever find it. This wasn't a heat of them statement. Tiche was a plan shared in advance. The timing: the weekend of October 2nd to 4th, 2020. It's the first time since their breakup that their son stayed with Contreras Perez. This gave him an alibi and a reason Cassandra would be less likely to have people around her. The location data, cell phone data, placed him in the same area as Cassandra when she disappeared. The cleanup: he reported his work phone missing shortly after, possibly to destroy evidence. He fled to Minnesota and Iowa instead of helping search for Cassandra. Under this theory, Contreras Perez waited for the right opportunity. When Cassandra left the Unity trailer court in the early morning hours of October 3rd, he was waiting. He intercepted her, perhaps forcing her off the road or confronting her directly. He killed her, hid her body in a location he had scouted in advance, and disposed of her vehicle elsewhere. The discovery of her remains about 8 miles from Unity, in a rural area on private property, supports this theory. The location wasn't random. It was remote enough to avoid detection, but close enough for him to access easily. The party to a crime charges suggest prosecutors believe Contreras-Perez didn't act alone. This theory posits that he had help before, during, or after the murder. Evidence supporting this theory: the completeness of the disappearance. Both Cassandra and her car vanished without a trace. Disposing of a body and a vehicle requires time, transportation, and possibly multiple people. The quick timeline, from approximately 4 a.m. when Cassandra left Unity until later that morning, Contreras-Perez would have had to intercept her, kill her, hide her body, dispose of her vehicle, and return to his normal life. That's a lot to accomplish alone. The persistent search for accomplices, even after Contreras-Perez's conviction. Authorities continue to search for potential accomplices. This suggests they have evidence or intelligence pointing to other people's involvement. The district attorney's statements. Melissa Inlow has repeatedly said they will continue to search for Mr. Contreras-Perez's accomplices. Plural. This isn't speculative language. This suggests specific evidence of multiple people's involvement. Who might these accomplices be? Prosecutors haven't said publicly, but possibilities include family members who might have helped hide evidence, friends who provided alibis or transportation, associates who knew about the plan, the red or maroon SUV that authorities were looking for in December 2020 might be connected to an accomplice. If Contreras-Perez was driving one vehicle and Cassandra's car needed to be hidden, someone else would need to be involved. An alternative theory, though less supported by evidence, is that Contreras-Perez didn't plan to kill Cassandra, but a confrontation escalated. Under this theory, Contreras-Perez intercepted Cassandra as she left Unity, perhaps wanting to talk, argue about their relationship, or see his son. The confrontation turned physical. In rage or panic, he killed her. Then, realizing what he'd done, he had to hide the evidence. However, this theory is undercut by the internet searches a week before. The threat about hiding her body, the complete disappearance of both body and vehicle, and his immediate flight to other states. If this was a crime of passion, a confrontation gone wrong, you'd expect more evidence at a scene, more witnesses, more mistakes. Instead, the crime scene, wherever it was, has never been found. Despite the conviction and the discovery of remains, many questions remain. How did she die? The manner of death has not been publicly disclosed. Given the condition of remains after 4 years exposed to Wisconsin weather, determining cause of death may be difficult or impossible. Where exactly did the murder occur? Was she killed in Unity? On the road? At another location? The lack of a crime scene suggests either extreme cleanup or a murder in a location that has never been identified. Where is her car? The black 2015 Chevrolet Impala with license plate AHZ2509 has never been found. It could be submerged in a body of water, hidden in a private garage, dismantled in a junkyard, or repainted and given new plates. Who helped him? If accomplices exist, who are they? Why haven't they come forward? Are they being protected? Are they afraid? Why was the body placed in that specific location? The property in Brighton where her remains were found had no connection to either Cassandra or Contreras-Perez. Why there? Did he have access to that land? Did an accomplice choose the location? What will happen with the retrial? With the conviction overturned on procedural grounds and a new trial ordered, will Contreras-Perez be convicted again? Will different evidence be presented? Will the discovery of remains change anything? Beyond the specifics of this case, Cassandra's story fits into a larger, tragic pattern of domestic violence homicides, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. 1 in 4 women will experience severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime on average. Nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. The presence of a gun in a domestic violence situation increases the risk of homicide by 500%, leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time for a victim. Cassandra did everything right. She told people about the abuse. She documented the abuse with photos. She left the relationship. She moved close to family for support. She warned people who would hurt her if something happened. Dan still. She couldn't escape. This is the reality of domestic violence. It's not just about individual choices or strength. It's about someone else's determination to control, to harm, to destroy. Contreras' threat that he knew where to hide her body so no one would find it exemplifies the ultimate form of control. Even in death, he tried to control her story, her legacy, her family's ability to grieve. For 4 years, he succeeded. But the truth has a way of emerging. Evidence doesn't disappear. Bodies are found. Justice, however delayed, arrives as of October 2025, 5 years after Cassandra Ayon disappeared. This is where the case stands. Jesus Contreras Perez remains in custody at a Wisconsin state prison, serving his life sentence without the possibility of parole. However, his conviction has been vacated pending a new trial, which is expected to be scheduled for 2025 or 2026. Prosecutors from the Clark County District Attorney's Office and the Wisconsin Department of Justice have indicated they will retry the case, despite the hearsay issues that led to the overturned conviction. They believe they have sufficient evidence to secure another guilty verdict. The discovery of Cassandra's remains in Denozer 2024 may actually strengthen the prosecution's case in a retrial. Previously, they had to prove a murder occurred without a body. Now, there is physical proof that Cassandra is deceased and that her remains were hidden, supporting the hiding a corpse. Charged directly, despite the conviction and discovery of remains. The investigation is not closed. In January 2025, the Clark County Sheriff's Office confirmed to investigators that they are still actively pursuing leads related to potential accomplices. The party to a crime charges suggests prosecutors have evidence or intelligence about others' involvement, but no additional arrests have been made as of October 2025. For Cassandra's family, her parents, her son, her friends, the discovery of her remains brought bittersweet closure. Finally, after 1,521 days of not knowing, they could lay her to rest. They could have a funeral. They could have a grave to visit, but the pain of her loss is permanent. Her son, who was 7 years old when she disappeared, is now a teenager who has grown up without his mother. He will never hear her laugh again, never get her advice, never have her at his graduation or wedding. Her parents will never stop missing their daughter. The empty chair at holidays. The phone that will never ring with her voice. The grandchild being raised without his mother. Amanda Ruth, Cassandra's best friend since grade school, will never again share the milestones of life with her childhood neighbor. The Facebook page, Missing Cassandra Ayon, still exists, now transformed from a search tool to a memorial. The posts that once pleaded please continue to share, now serve as a reminder of a life cut short. Cassandra displayed clear warning signs of being in an abusive relationship, physical injuries, isolation, controlling behavior from her partner. These signs were documented and reported. Yet she still couldn't escape. Statistically, leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time. Cassandra left, moved across the street from her parents, and was still targeted. This reinforces the need for robust protective services and resources for domestic violence survivors. Cassandra told multiple people that if anything happened to her, Contras Perez would be responsible. She was believed, but belief isn't always enough to prevent tragedy. This case demonstrates that prosecutors can successfully pursue murder charges even without a body. The evidence of pattern, threat, opportunity, and digital footprints can be sufficient to secure conviction. For over 4 years, law enforcement never stopped looking for Cassandra. That persistence even after a conviction led to the discovery of her remains. All tips can be provided anonymously. These services are confidential and can help with safety planning. Resources and support. Cassandra Ayon was 27 years old when her life was stolen from her. She was a daughter who had lunch with her mother on what would be her last day of life. She was a mother to a 7-year-old boy who needed her. She was a friend who made plans to go shopping, plans she would never fulfill. She was a hard worker who drove 45 minutes to her job at Marathon Cheese and never called in sick. She was someone who had been working on herself, getting fit, getting strong, trying to build a better life. She was someone who knew she was in danger and told everyone who would listen. She was someone who did everything right and still couldn't escape. But she was also someone who will not be forgotten. Her case brought awareness to domestic violence in Wisconsin. Her story has been featured in podcasts, news articles, and now this documentary. Her name is known, and most importantly, justice was served. Her killer was caught, tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. Even as he awaits a retrial, he remains behind bars, unable to hurt anyone else. Cassandra Ayon's life mattered. Her death was not in vain. Through her story, others might be saved. If you're in an abusive relationship, please reach out for help. If you know someone who is, please support them. Believe them. Help them plan for safety. Because Cassandra warned everyone. She documented everything. She told people exactly who would hurt her, and she was right. Rest in peace, Cassandra Ayon. You are not forgotten. You will never be forgotten. The disappearance of Cassandra Ayon from Unity, Wisconsin, on October 3, 2020, sparked a 4-year search that captivated central Wisconsin and beyond. Her case demonstrates both the devastating reality of domestic violence and the persistence of investigators who never gave up. For 1,521 days, her family waited for answers. On November 30, 2024, those answers finally came. Cassandra Ayon has been found. Her remains have been identified. She can finally rest. But the search for complete justice continues. Investigators still seek her vehicle and potential accomplices. A retrial looms. The full truth of what happened that October morning may never be fully known. What we do know is this: Cassandra Ayon was loved. She is remembered. And her story serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of domestic violence and the importance of believing survivors when they tell us they're in danger. If you have any information about this case, please contact the Clark County Sheriff's Office. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, AT 1-800-799-7233. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share this video to keep Cassandra's story alive.